This is Hannah and Kaylin, back again with Double Talk. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Kaylin.
Ask yourself this. Is there a show, movie, or game from your childhood that you vividly remember, but cannot find, even after scouring the depths of the internet? Maybe you need to describe it differently, or just haven't found the right key words. But there's another possibility. What if this thing that you remember is legitimately gone? What if no one ever shared it online, or everyone who ever owned it lost their copy, or it wasn't properly archived by the creator? This is called lost media, and for many people, it's more than just a concept, it's an obsession. The r/lost media subreddit is a community of nearly 200,000, many of whom spend day after day searching for forgotten pieces. There's even an entire forum dedicated to the hunt, called the Lost Media Wiki. One of the community's trailblazers goes by L Supersonic Q on YouTube, where he's spent years documenting the world's most feverish lost media searches and introducing his hundreds of thousands of followers to new ones. We caught up with L Supersonic Q to chat about lost media, how media gets lost, and whether anything is ever truly gone forever. Listen in. I want you to start by telling us kind of the origin of your YouTube channel. How did you become so interested in lost media? Because it wasn't always lost media on your channel.
So the beginnings of my YouTube career are probably something that a lot of people don't know about, because it's not really something that I talk about very often. But basically, it starts all the way back in 2009, back in middle school. I had a friend who was really into YouTube at the time, and it was kind of like a new thing back then. And he was an artist. He would post his animations to YouTube, and he would share them with our friend group. And, I was an artist back then. I was doing sculptures. I wasn't doing animations or anything like he was. But I said, well, my stuff is just as good as his. Why does he get all the credit for doing this cool content? I want to do that too. So I kind of made my own YouTube channel to compete with his. And I posted some of my clay models. I took pictures of them and put them together in like a slideshow, basically. And I remember when I released my first couple of those, they got like 100 views in a few days, which was really good at the time. Like, yeah, 100 views. And I showed them around my friend group and stuff. And the friend who was animating took notice. And we kind of had a little rivalry after that. And it kind of stayed that way from about 2009 when my channel began until about 2015, 2016. Around that time, though, my friend was kind of long gone doing, YouTube stuff. He wasn't really into it anymore. And the art that I had been posting, I did sculptures, but I also did some drawings and stuff too. But that had kind of dried up. People weren't really interested in it. So it was around that time I wanted to start making like more edited content, more, I guess, like video essay kind of stuff. And you got to wonder how exactly this kind of stuff ends up happening, because the introduction to lost media happened around this time. I remember I was in my living room on my TV and I had my Nintendo Wii U, like the game console. I was on the YouTube app on my Wii U and I was literally just browsing videos for no reason. And I came across a video called like top 40 lost or banned kids shows from Blame It on Jorge.
Oh, another great one.
Another legend.
Yes, one of the bigger lost media YouTubers. And at the time I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about lost media, but the thumbnail had pictures of like shows I watched as a kid, like Jimmy Neutron, I think maybe like Billy and Mandy. And I said, lost or banned stuff? What's lost or banned about like Cartoon Network shows? I didn't understand that. And I watched that video, and that was like the whoa moment to lost media. Like, this is a thing that exists, and I didn't even know about it. And specifically, there was one topic in that video that really set everything into motion. It was Kablam episode 29. Kablam was a old Nickelodeon like cartoon variety show that I think I watched as a kid, but I didn't quite remember it from the video. But there was an episode called episode 29 that apparently like fans of the show didn't even know if this episode existed or not, which is weird. It's like, how do you not know if an episode of a show exists?
It is a weird concept at first.
Yeah. And apparently, like, rumors had been thrown around online that it was supposed to be the series finale of the cartoon, but the show was picked up for another season, so they never aired the finale. But somehow people knew it was made, but no one's ever seen it, but there's no proof that it even existed. So it was this really weird, like, what the heck is that? And it really, really stuck with me. And because I was looking for more like edited content to make at the time, I said, I got to solve this Kablam mystery. I got to figure out, does this exist or does it not exist? And that really was the beginning of like looking into lost media, deciding to make lost media videos. And after that one, of course, the views were way more than a couple hundred in a day or whatever it was. It was a few thousand in a few days. I'm like, whoa, people must really like this content. And it motivated me to make more. And then naturally, that's how everything kind of grew into what it is.
I love how it started with a little friendly friend rivalry. Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah. I love too that you didn't change the content that you were making based off of what you think other people would like, and you really just decided to make a video based off of your own interest, and then it just turned out that other people liked it too. Yeah. That's really cool. I think that it shows in your work.
Oh, for sure. You've kept your heart into it.
That's exactly kind of like the thing too, is like, you know, a lot of people might think that I just got into Lost Media because it's popular, even though back when I did it wasn't popular. No one knew what it was. But I kind of thought that shift was very, very gradual because, like I said, I was doing the art and I loved the art. But then I ended up finding out all this Nickelodeon stuff. And it was almost like revisiting a part of my childhood that I didn't even know existed or that I had a connection to at all. And because I grew up with that stuff, I was able to rediscover it in a new way, but a natural way where like, I want to tell the stories about these cartoons. It wasn't like, oh, I know people like old cartoons, so let's make videos about that. It was just like, I want to talk about this stuff because I grew up with it. And now I can talk about it just in a different way.
You know what I just realized? Do you remember the creepypasta Lost episode of SpongeBob? And it just seemed like the most absurd
It seems
thing
ridiculous.
ever. It seems ridiculous. And now that's literally what we're finding.
Because your initial reaction is, like you said, it's such a popular show. There's no way that it could just not be found anymore.
And that's another thing I wanted to ask you. Have you, in the years since you started doing Lost Media videos, have you kind of figured out a way to answer the question that I have, which is, how does media, especially on a popular show, get lost in the first place?
That's a really, really good question. And I almost feel like in a way that that answer has shifted over the years. A lot of the media that we had been trying to find was like lost like pilot episodes from cartoons that, you know, never aired to begin with. They were pitched to the networks and stuff, and no one knew they existed. Like a really, really famous example is the pilot to Johnny Bravo from Cartoon Network. It was called Mess O Blues. It was an early animation that the creator did while he was still in college, and it kind of took Johnny Bravo. He was like an Elvis impersonator, and the plot was a little different. It looked a little different, and like we didn't even know that that was like a thing that existed for a long time, and like no one would because it never aired or whatever. And that's actually still lost. He has a copy, but he doesn't want to release it because he likes the idea that it's like rare and stuff, which I kind of understand. But point is, it's stuff like that we would find existence or proof that it was made, but we just had no way to get it because they were never made to be released. And it was even like you mentioned Cracks with Sesame Street. Like we knew Cracks existed, people had been looking for it, but like, well, where are we going to find a copy of it? And even with the Wicked Witch episode 847, we knew that existed and it had been banned, but like, where are we going to get it? And that's still true to some extent. A lot of that stuff just was never released, or it was only aired once and then taken out of circulation. The only people that would have it would be the creators. But nowadays, I feel like we're almost entering this new like era for finding out that lost content exists. SpongeBob Lost Media is very, very huge. You know, I love SpongeBob Lost Media. It was last summer. I got an email from an anonymous like Nickelodeon employee who had that book. No one would have known that would have existed at all, because no one talked about it ever. And even with the uncensored Sailor Mouth recording from that episode where they swear, new information about that has come out recently that I didn't even know about. That we thought that the recording of that was only with Nickelodeon, because like Tom Kenny and the other voice actors always said, Nickelodeon buried it at the center of the earth, so you'll never hear it. One of the crew members said he used to have a copy on tape that he brought out of the studio. So like recordings of that are out in the wild now. We're discovering that like this stuff was lost in ways that we didn't even know. Like I thought, okay, we're going to have to contact Nickelodeon to get the uncensored Sailor Mouth, which they're never going to release. But no, like people actually might have that out there. So there's almost like a divide now between knowing that people have stuff and then not even knowing they had stuff and being like, oh, that's new. How do we get that? And I feel like now we're kind of entering that period of discovery where we're discovering all this new stuff that just seems to show up now. Like last year, we kind of called it one of the biggest years for found media because so much stuff showed up just completely unexpectedly. And it's like, maybe it's because Lost Media is getting more popular that we're naturally finding more things and people are more willing to share their work. but I think we're headed towards a direction where like more of this stuff is showing up that we didn't even know about. And I think that's almost like a reward in itself, not just getting a piece of lost media found, but like now we're getting stuff that we didn't even know about. It's almost like a bonus, like the cherry on top of the lost media cake.
People probably
They don't even know to look for
People
it.
probably have all kinds of things just like in their basement that they literally don't even know is of interest to anybody. Somebody who works at a network or an animator, people like that, they probably are starting to ask themselves, is
What
there
happened?
What,
Yeah, what
like,
happened to
what
it,
happened
yeah.
to this thing that I remember?
Like there was this commercial. What's the commercial from a long time ago that aired? And
Oh,
people were like,
the flower shop or something.
yeah, a flower shop commercial.
The Encarnacion Chavez from the Philippines, I think.
I remember I was watching a video. I don't know if it was yours or not, but I was watching a video. They found a YouTube channel of somebody just filming so many, the screen of so many commercials from around that time. And it's like the metadata on the YouTube video isn't necessarily going to be about that commercial. So
Yeah.
the video could be titled like Video 27,000 or whatever.
No, it's like Clockman. I think it was called Sally something.
Dressy Sally, yeah.
It was on YouTube all along.
Yeah,
And people
you just don't know. Either from your own research or just from what you've gathered for how other people have found lost media, if somebody's looking for a piece of lost media, where do you think that they should start? Like, is it like a Reddit post or is it like a scan through YouTube? Like, where's the best place to start when you're trying to find a piece of lost media?
I remember in kindergarten, this is like my lost media, I remember in kindergarten playing an educational computer game, and it was just like 2 slices of bread, and then you could choose to either put grape jelly or rainbow jelly on it, and then there was a voiceover that said jelly sandwich, and that's all I know about it.
Like, what do you do?
Where do I begin?
Well, with something like that, one of my favorite ways to go about trying to find like especially a piece of like personal lost media like that is actually kind of involving yourself, within the lost media community. I love the Lost Media Wiki forums because people will go there and type a thread. I'm trying to find this bread sandwich jelly game from my childhood. Let me describe it for you. And you can actually get a lot of other people who either maybe remember the same thing or like, oh yeah, like I have some old friends that have old computer games. It's really a good way. It's a good jumping off point to kind of like see if anyone else has a similar memory of yours. And you never know what could come from there. We've had a lot of personal lost media searches kind of start there and end there because other people saw the thread and they all contributed to it. So that's a really good way. I know the Lost Media Wiki has a Discord server too. That's also really good for like getting people involved in searches. But for something a little more, I guess maybe more mainstream, like a Nickelodeon thing or a Cartoon Network thing, I've actually found that like there is a lot of crossover and overlap between Lost Media community and like the cartoon community, let's say. I've talked to and been part of many other like Nickelodeon servers and communities online that actually do have their own like subcategories for Lost Media. So it's like, you don't even have to look just in the Lost Media Wiki. If you go to like Nickelodeon communities or Nickelodeon wikis and you say, I'm looking for this lost commercial, there's a chance that people could like help you out there. Like this was kind of a more recent example, I guess, of that. It's not like a super groundbreaking thing, but I thought it was kind of cool because it is almost exactly what you're explaining. Back in the day, like the late 2000s, when the anime Naruto was airing on Cartoon Network, there was a little parental warning screen that played before one of the episodes. That was like, this episode contains mild violence, viewer discretion advised. And people like had remembered that. Recently there was a thread about that on the forums. People like remembered this screen existing, but they weren't sure if it was real. They're like, I think I remember that and stuff. And I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, I swear I remember that because it was like kind of like ominous,
As a kid, that would freak me out for sure.
Yeah, and people say that like there was like birds chirping and stuff, a creepy like unsettling thing. It only aired once for one episode and no one had a recording, but people were talking about it on old threads. So I had made like a tweet recently about it. I'm like, we're trying to find this lost parental warning screen, and we had a screenshot of it. Someone actually did find a screenshot, but we didn't have like the bird chirping creepiness and stuff. And I think maybe a day or two later, after I tweeted about it, someone told me, oh, I'm part of a Cartoon Network archive Discord server. Someone had recordings of Naruto from when it was aired on Cartoon Network. Here's the parental warning screen. Boom, there it was. And it's like, just because someone in an archive server had it, we got it found now. And that's a very small example in terms of like what people want to look for and stuff. Just a a warning screen, but it's a very good example of like that's exactly the kind of thing that like lost media has spread to. It's not just a lost media community thing anymore. Now it's like anyone that's even closely related or even just partially related to like lost media content, there's a chance that like they have collections or they've heard of it or they will help you out. So possibly another good side effect of lost media becoming so popular.
It makes sense because you're going to the people who you know would care most about it.
Right,
If anyone was
yeah.
going to know, it would be somebody in that community.
Now, a couple of times it's already come up, like, creepy lost media, right? Like, creepypasta, like, Cracks is creepy, a lot of people. Like, this creepy, the birds chirping, the commercial that we talked about is creepy. What do you think it is that made this influx of interest in lost media? Like, I do feel like there's some kind of connection, maybe not for everybody, but for a lot of people, in, like, these vague, mysterious memories of, like, things being creepy and, like, wanting to know if, like, that was just them being a kid and they kind of read this creepy vibe into it when it wasn't there. And so they feel like I need to watch the commercial now as an adult and see, like, is this actually creepy or was I just a kid, you know?
Everything's scary.
Everything's scarier when you're a kid, right? What do you think the relationship is between people who are into the creepy, weird, mysterious part of YouTube and lost media?
There's not necessarily a divide between creepy lost media and not creepy lost media. I guess in my head there kind of is, because back in the early days, like when I was first starting to do it, it actually was mostly creepy, and people would take like not creepy topics like those lost pilots and they would make them creepy. That was the appeal. And I think the appeal with the creepiness, whether or not it's like intentional or not, you know, whether people purposely try to make lost pilots creepy, I think that in itself comes from the fact that people like people like finding stuff that they feel like they shouldn't be finding, I guess.
Yes.
They like that thrill of like, this is scary, I want to see what it's all about. Did you hear of like Go for a Punch? It was basically a post from 4chan about a really creepy, scary like anime that someone had seen when they were a kid, about like a bunch of girls who went into the bathroom and they like got murdered or something. It was a really, really creepy, strange premise. And at the time I don't like creepy stuff. I don't do with that stuff. So I didn't want anything to do with it, but I knew it was big, and it was a big search for this anime about murders. And I think it was just because of that fact that it's about murders. One person recollected it and everyone feels like it shouldn't exist. They got to see how crazy it is. They got to see how creepy it is. It's just for that reason that they had to find it. They had to figure out what this mystery was kind of all about. And I guess to some extent, I don't think it's real. I think it was one big troll. It was kind of inconclusive, but as far as I've seen, every bit of proof that's come out about it has been debunked. That's the draw, though. That's the whole. And I think for better or worse, it's because of that creepiness that like people got to see what it's about. Like it's just that thing. But I feel like that's only like one part of it, though. I think on the end, that's more my type of stuff. For me, it's like reconnecting with your childhood. Like that's a lot of it for like the cartoon stuff. And that's why I talk about cartoon stuff like so much, is because it's like I'm able to relive my childhood in a way that I didn't even know about. And that, you know, it's like revisiting all these old shows just in a different way. And I love being able to do that, discovering new content from a show that ended 20 years ago. For that reason, that's why like I love doing it. And you learn a lot of new things about the shows in general. Like I've learned so many new things just about SpongeBob production and just how the show was made just through the research and like the lost media. Like this is one of my favorite things of all time, and it's still lost actually. So someday I hope we get it. Back when SpongeBob was like first being like, back when the pilot was being made, they do the recording before, you know, they record the audio. And during the original recording session for the original SpongeBob pilot, his name was SpongeBoy. It wasn't SpongeBob, it was SpongeBoy. And they recorded the whole pilot with everyone using his name as SpongeBoy. But then they found out that there was already like a pencil product called SpongeBoy, and it was like trademarked. So they had to change it to SpongeBob. But the SpongeBoy audio had already been recorded. That exists. That's out there somewhere. Tom Kenny confirmed it in an interview, I think, from many, many years ago. And like I had heard about the SpongeBoy thing, but I didn't know they recorded audio for it. I always heard it was just they were going to call him that, then it had to be changed. I didn't know they actually like recorded for it. So like there's actual SpongeBoy lost media out there. Like that's cool. I never would have found that if I wasn't looking for, you know, whatever else I was looking for at the time. So yes, I love being able to rediscover that stuff and like learn about new stuff. And I think even the viewers and stuff kind of that resonates with them too. Is it's like they get to, I guess, again, like I said, like rediscover that part of their childhood. And I get a lot of comments and messages from people who are like, I haven't thought about that show since I was a kid. You've unlocked a childhood memory. And I love hearing that, because it's like, in a way, that's a large portion of like why we even do this, is because the shows mean something to us.
You know what I think it is? It's like obviously the lost media that just straight up has a shock factor to it, like the anime is one thing, but I feel like there's also not like a creepy vibe, but there is a mysterious vibe about the fact that these things were made, like shows and movies are made for people to watch, right? And video games are made for people to play. And there's just something odd about thinking about that nobody got to see it. So how do you take all the research that you do and then put it into a narrative that makes sense for one of your videos? Because these stories sometimes have a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs. Oh, they have dead ends, like false lead.
Yeah, a lot of it is actually I guess like the personal experience that I go on in a search. If I'm writing a video or in a video and I'm saying like, and then we hit a dead end and I hit my head against the wall because I couldn't believe it. That like actually happened. Like it's almost like taking what I experienced during a search and just kind of creatively writing it in a way where it's more entertaining for the viewer. And it really is based off of like actual experiences. It's not like just made up for the video. A lot of it is like when I sit down and cover a topic, especially I can recall it was that rumored lost pilot to Ed, Ed and Eddie that didn't actually exist. But like that one, like I think I literally spent 16 hours straight researching that because it was so fascinating. And like as I was discovering all these old like websites that hadn't been touched since 2009, I really exclaimed to myself, like, wow, like this is out here. Like, who would have thought there was an Ed and Eddie forum from 2009 still around and people are still talking about it? And it's like just so crazy to me. And it's like, oh, got to add that to the video because it like adds culture to like what's going on and gives you the bigger picture. And like when we get those dead ends, like you mentioned, it makes you very frustrated to the point where it's like you want to kind of retell that in the video, almost as a way to kind of get your frustrations out too. It happened a lot for the search for Slamfest 99, that Nintendo costume event thing. That whole search has basically been one big dead end. And it's like every update video I made, everyone was hoping, oh, we're going to get it now. And then it's like at the end of the video, and now we're at another dead end. And after a while, it's like, and it's like, there's a like almost like a connection between the viewer and like my writing that's like they can feel that pain with me even though they didn't actually like search for it with me. Being able to like communicate that through videos is like a really important method of telling the story. Even if it's a topic I haven't personally researched that much and I use an article as like a reference point or whatever, I will still like go out of my way to be like, okay, like, well, who else has looked for this? Is there anything else online that maybe isn't in the article that I could like talk about, you know, that adds more to the story or whatever. So in some kind of way, I always try to add that like the human element to like any kind of search, I guess, so that it goes beyond just like, oh, I'm sitting at a computer and I'm just reading like, you know, somebody's LinkedIn account or whatever.
What piece of lost media that was found, so found media, were you most personally like, oh, thank God this was found? Like I couldn't wait another day without figuring out what happened with this?
I would say one of the ones that probably made me feel that way the most was actually a recent find, because it was like something that we never thought was actually going to show up, and then it did. The JBVO Dragon Ball Z segment, which was a really, really old one. And it was that one about that show that Johnny Bravo hosted, and a viewer called in and requested that he play Dragon Ball Z, but it was too long, so he did like his own commentary over it. I remember when that showed up, and it was so cool. The way that the whole search wrapped up. I mean, that was another really good example of a topic that was mostly only talked about in threads and old forums and stuff for a long time. Like when I first covered it, it was only talked about in threads and forums and stuff. And I think not too long after I had made a video, as happens, someone else from the community who collected tapes ended up getting a tape with a very, very short clip of it. And they uploaded it on YouTube. It proved it existed. Like we already kind of believed it did, but there were still some doubts. But that was like, boom, we got our first little clip. it existed. I think that was back in like 2017, maybe. So it was a long time ago. And we kind of just never really thought that whole segment would show up because we're like, well, how is it going to? Someone would have had to have recorded it from Cartoon Network. Recordings of that show are very, very rare. There weren't even a lot on YouTube to begin with. So we're like, how are we going to end up getting that? And I think for years, everyone kind of just forgot about it. I kind of forgot about it. But it was definitely like one of my most wanted because it just was so wacky. Like Johnny Bravo and Dragon Ball Z, like who would have thought? Someone whose mom, I believe, worked on um JBVO at Cartoon Network, I guess had a collection of every single episode that they ever made, including a pilot that we didn't know existed, and it was called WBVO, not JBVO. So a little difference there that again we didn't know about, which is cool. So he said he was going to go through all the episodes and like archive them all online, but he specifically said he would keep an eye out for that Dragon Ball Z segment. And I remember I think it was on Mother's Day last year, which is funny because I think the original air date of that episode was either on Mother's Day or it was like a week after Mother's Day. It was almost the same time. All those years later, I remember I think I was either on Twitter or I was on Discord. I got notifications on both. Everyone was saying, El Supersonic Q, look what was just found. He found it on his tape. He digitized it, and it was a good like 3 minute segment or something of him of the viewer calling in, and he's talking to the viewer, and then he runs to the, and it was just like this surreal thing, like this like almost like urban legend from like years and years and years ago finally showed up, and I tweeted about it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's found. And like everyone collectively like freaked out. It was such a good feeling. And like, I'll never forget that. Just that, like that tweet that went out about that, just everyone was just collective. Oh, it's collective joy seeing that. And like, I watched it. It was so hilarious.
It just makes you think that you never really know. You never know when these things are going to show up. Like you say, you just log onto Twitter one day and it's like all of a sudden, after all these years, here it is, you know?
What if Lost Media was found since we've been on this call?
Yeah, you don't know.
We don't know.
I could check the forums and someone could have found something. Yeah, who knows? I mean, we're still waiting on a couple of things that literally are going to get down to like one person looking through their recordings. They could have been uploaded right now. Yeah, who knows?
I mean, on the other hand, what piece of Lost Media that are you aware exists that you would still really like to see be found someday?
I would probably say that Slamfest 99 topic that I mentioned earlier, because I would say to date, that's probably been the biggest search that I've involved myself in, and it's probably the one that I've spent the most time searching for. And at this point, like I do want to see it. Of course, it's a live stream from 1999. It's gonna be pretty bad, I'm sure. But at this point, I almost feel like it's more of just like I want to get this found for the sake of finding it, rather than like I want to see this so badly, just for the amount of time I've spent looking for it and all the dead ends that have occurred. It's like we should have found it 3 times over 2 years ago. That's another good example of like everyone we talk to is basically a dead end, or they'll give us a little like trail to follow, but then like that'll be a dead end. And like earlier on, I was so much more optimistic about the search. I think that it was actually, and whether you could say it was because of the pandemic or what have you, I remember it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like June 2020. So maybe it was because everyone was home doing nothing. That's when I started researching it. And like, I was getting replies from old Nintendo people and old this and that. And like people that I'm like, wow, I can't believe they replied to me about this little costume brawl from 1999. Of course, they didn't like have any like content or anything, but back then it was a very, very good progress was being made on it. I'm like, okay, it's only going to be a matter of time before we find that last person that has it. But now we don't even know if a tape still exists of it, because like the big three places that we've talked to, like well, we didn't really talk to Nintendo. We kind of did, but they didn't really give us like a clear answer. But like Nintendo, the PR firm that put it on, and the web service that streamed it, they all seem to imply that like they don't have it or they don't know about it. And those are the only places that would have it. We've kind of it's possible someone did record it, but we've sort of like, that's very, very unlikely at this point. Just, it was 1999. It wasn't a very well-known event. It just wasn't a very popular thing. So it's very, very unlikely that we're going to find a homemade recording. And even if we did, it probably wouldn't be like the whole thing or the full thing. That is something that like, man, if I could just end a search instantly, that would be it. Just just give me the Slam Fest. I just want it to be found so we can just conclude a 4 years long search and everyone can be happy. That's definitely like that. That'd probably be number one for me, I think.
Do you think that anything's truly lost, though?
With big companies like Nintendo or Nickelodeon, it's hard to imagine that for archive's sake, they don't have a recording of everything that's ever aired. Or do you think that they don't have these things on record?
That's a good question. I feel like it's a little open-ended. I think when it comes to something like Nickelodeon, for example, or Cartoon Network, I believe it's implied. It's implied that they would have recordings of all that, like the old Sponge Boy audio and the Sailor Mouth. Like, it's implied they would have that because why would they have deleted it? However, in that case, it actually sort of gets double lost because I've heard rumors and stuff from some contacts that even if Nickelodeon, let's say, has audio and stuff, it would be on a format that it's not like it's been digitized. It would be on like an old tape real format that would have to go through several processes to get online. So like in a way, it wouldn't even be as simple as like uploading to begin with. But that aside, that's all implied. Now, the first thing I think of when you say isn't everything saved, one of the topics I think of is the Sonic the Hedgehog Tokyo Toy Show prototype. It was like the original iteration of the first Sonic game that ever released, the early version of it before it was finalized. And the rumor is that Sega themselves, who made the game, they've never released that original prototype because they lost it. They lost that original the one prototype of that game. The rumor is it's gone forever because they don't know where they put it. So unless someone has a copy of it or Sega can find it, I think everyone's kind of thinking that's gone forever. And something I've also been looking into recently as well, they released a lot of downloaded content on one of their game consoles, the Super Famicom, back in Japan only, back in the late 90s. They were saved on these like cartridges that only have a limited number of plays, and the data on them can like corrupt after, these are like 20, 30 years old now. So a lot of people are trying to like archive those games from those cartridges. We assume Nintendo must have like the source code and stuff for that, but maybe they don't because they've never been re-released or anything. And if they don't, we have to find these cartridges and like preserve the data before they're gone. Because if Nintendo doesn't have it and the cartridges go bad, then we don't have the games anymore. With like Nickelodeon stuff, it's implied they would have it, but then with like video games, it's a lot more sensitive because it's not like here's a video file. It's like here's code that can go bad after a while. So it's all a different sort of realm. But I think generally speaking, to get back to the main question though, I think mostly speaking, media it's never really lost forever, because I think we've seen too many times where something unexpected will show up that no one even thought was still around. So give something a long enough period of time to show up, and I'd like to think it probably will.
Your channel has already evolved so much since you first started. Where do you see El Supersonic Q going in the next couple of years?
I think a lot about this all the time. So I even feel like even over the past couple years, I feel like it's evolved quite a bit just with the way that I sort of format the videos and sort of the information presented in them and stuff. And I actually, this year, what I really want to do is actually, I want to like spend more time on certain topics, and I want to like make videos longer, I guess. Which is something I feel like, maybe last year I feel like a lot of it was sort of like, let's pick topics that maybe I don't know if that could appeal to more people, but like let's cover some stuff that people maybe haven't heard about before, in the hopes that like more people will gain interest in this stuff, sort of like to get the community more involved, which I still like doing and I still want to do. But I feel like maybe now I want to maybe spend more time with the topics I cover, and maybe rather than just say like, oh, this exists, here's a little bit about it, you think we can all find it together, which is still good, but maybe something that the viewers can maybe think a little more about on their own time. New topics always show up, and crazy stuff happens with everything that you never quite know what you're going to be covering from week to week. So I mean, who's to say?